Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm sharing a teacher thank you card which uses a lawn fawn stamp set and features a spinning element. I started with Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, and I'm stamping the apple from the Thanks a Bushel stamp set with Gina K Designs Jet Black Amalgam ink, and I'm stamping that a bunch of times. Now I only need 12 of these apples, but I decided to stamp a few extra in case I make any mistakes. Next I took the different faces from the stamp set and I added one of those faces to each of the apples that I'm going to be coloring in. Normally I do most of my stamping with my Misti Tool, but because I'm stamping the same image multiple times and a bunch of little tiny images, it just seemed a lot easier to use an acrylic block for the stamping. I colored in all of the images using my Copic markers, and I do have those marker caps off to the side so that you can see the colors that I'm using. Now, the coloring on this took quite a while because there are a lot of these images, so I thought I'd speed it up by just showing you one of each of the things that I colored. For example, with the red apples, I colored them all the same way, so I'm just going to focus on coloring for one of them. To color the apples, I first took my lightest color and I filled in the entire apple. I then took my darker color and I added shading around the edge of the apple, as well as the area where the stem hits the apple, and then I blended out that shading with the lighter color. Sometimes in order to get the best blend, I did have to touch the tip of my lighter marker to the tip of my darker marker, and this helped to blend those two colors a little bit better. The next step in coloring these apples was to take a darker marker and add some stippling to the side of the apple, and this just creates the illusion of a little bit of texture on that apple. To finish up the apples, I colored in all of the leaves, and I just now realized that the marker caps are off of the screen there. There's two marker caps that are off the frame, and those two colors are the same two colors that I used to color in the green apples. Now I used those two colors of green to color the leaves in on all of the red and yellow apples, and then I added in that darker green color for the green apples so that there would be a little bit of contrast between the apple and the leaves. Here you can see I started coloring in the basket that's holding the apples. I wanted this basket to look like it's made out of wood, so while I was coloring it, I used lines for my brush strokes, and I didn't really blend out those lines very well so that you can still kind of see them, and that kind of creates the texture that I'm looking for of a wooden basket. For the two bands around the basket, I wanted those to look like metal, so I'm using a couple of gray colors and I'm leaving a nice highlighted area so that it looks really shiny. Once that coloring was all done, I ran it through my scan and cut to cut out all of the images, and then I took out a piece of Lucky Clover cardstock from Gina K Designs and a piece of green apple cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. I'm using some of the dies from the Nested Circle die set from Hero Arts to cut some circles and rings out of those two pieces of cardstock. I took out the Planks background stamp from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm placing that in my Misti Tool, and I did have to take the foam pad out of my Misti Tool so that that background stamp will fit in there nicely. I have a piece of 4.5 by 4.5 dark chocolate cardstock from Gina K Designs, and I wanted to create a really subtle looking background. So in order to do that, I'm stamping the background stamp with Gina K Designs Chocolate Truffle Amalgam ink. I adhered that background onto a 5 by 5 craft card base, and then I started to create my spinning element. So I have that ring that I created earlier out of the green apple cardstock, and I'm using some doubled up foam tape to go around the inner edge of that ring. Once I finish creating that circle with the foam tape, I fill in the circle that the foam tape creates with more doubled up foam tape. Now I have this white ring that I cut out to act as kind of a buffer between my spinning ring and the background of the card. That just helps it to spin a little bit easier. Once both of those rings were in place, I took the circle that I cut out of Lucky Clover cardstock and I closed up that spinner so that it's locked in place. I placed all of the little apples around that spinner, and then I started to glue them down using my Gina K Designs Connect glue. Now, while I'm gluing all of these down, I wanted to take a second to give a shout out to my son for this card because he did help me with the design of this card. He was inspired by all of the spinner cards that I've done in the past, and he came up with this idea to use the apples on a spinner card, and I thought it was a great idea, so I decided to kind of steal that idea with his permission. Anyways, next I glued on that basket of apples in the center of my spinner. For the sentiment, I took the Thanks a Bushel stamp and I stamped that with Versafine Onyx Black ink onto some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, and then I cut that down into a strip and added some foam tape on the back. This sentiment does hang off the sides of that circle in the middle of my spinner, so when I took the backing off of the foam tape, I made sure to only take the backing off of the middle and leave the backing on those ends so that they don't stick to my spinner. For some finishing touches on this card, I first took my white gel pen and I added highlights to all of the apples. I then took a pink Copic marker and I colored in the little tongue that's sticking out on one of the smiley faces. And then I took my Copic multi-liner and I darkened up the eyes on the apples. To finish up the card, I wanted to add a second sentiment on the inside of the card, so I stamped the one that says, "For being a great teacher." So now the full sentiment reads, "Thanks a Bushel for being a great teacher." And here's a closer look at the finished card, and you can see that spinner element in action. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you really enjoyed this spinner card featuring that Lawn Fawn stamp set. All of the supplies that I used for today's card can be found in the description down below. If this is your first time on my channel and you enjoyed watching today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can see all of my future videos. I do new card videos every single week, and I'm going to be back with another one really soon. Again, thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a good day today.